And it's one of the things that really inspires me about the lived experience recovery organisations and now a bit inclusive recovery cities. So, you know, it's that idea of success and inspiration. So in Leeds, there's I don't know if you've come across Chris Sylvester, who's a great organisation called Getting Clean. And in spite of all the tut-tutting for harm reduction and saying, what do you mean that implies people are dirty? Getting Clean is his social enterprise for soap making. So he makes soap, recovery soap, soap with hope, fighting crime and grime 1 bar at a time. So he runs workshops in prisons and they do soap making events, and it's just brilliant. You know, it is a wonderful social enterprise, and he now employs a number of people. And it seems to me like I would still maintain the same basic mantra from all our research is, what's the summary of all the recovery research evidence? Jobs, friends and houses, or somewhere to live, someone to love, something to do. And you're right, you know, it seems to me like, so when we do our inclusive recovery cities workshops, we try and say, well, look, engage with some like 4 quadrants: sport, art and recreation, employment, training and education, volunteering and community involvement, and mutual aid and recovery groups. Get involved in at least one thing from each of those 4 sectors. So yesterday I was doing this in a prison between Wigan and Bolton. For anyone who thinks I spend my life in too many glamorous places, a prison between Wigan and Bolton is not one of them.
And you do spend a lot of time in prison generally.
Well, that is true. Actually, ironically, tomorrow I'm in court because I've had 4 speeding tickets, so I might be spending time in prison for another reason as well. Yeah, and they have some. So we were talking. They do great park runs, and we were like lining them up with a pathway, because they also have the fire service come in and do fire training for prisoners. And so what we're thinking is linking up that with initial health screening about sport and fitness, and links to apprenticeships into the fire service. So it's that, how do you combine to create multiple personalised pathways for people that allow them to kind of create models of opportunity. And you know, in a prison, an English prison, which has lots of challenges, they've got some astonishingly inspired, exciting. Manchester City go in and do football training in the prison. So, you know, there's genuinely big incentives for people.
So I like what you were saying about the 4 quadrants, because it connects back to something that you were saying earlier, of course, is that in a sense, call it a LERO or a recovery community, you know, lived experience recovery organisation or a recovery community, but it's got these, we can't write a single thing for it. It's not like we can prescribe a methadone clinic has A, B, C, D, and E, and if it doesn't have A, B, C, and D, it's not a methadone clinic. But what we can say is, if you don't have some of these characteristics, which is, I think, is what's trying to come through in these conversations we're having, that you must have some of these things. That, and you're absolutely right, no recovery organisation, if it doesn't have in the broadest sense mutual aid, that can be 12-step if that suits people, but it can also be other choices. But it does have to be mutual aid, absolutely, in the broad sense. And then, like you say, if it doesn't have a doing part, and if it doesn't have a, you know, either something to do with housing or jobs or something, if it's not actually changing the practical parts of people's lives, and so you in a way, you're absolutely right. You're talking about this notion that there is.
Oh look, I loved it. I would hate if there was ever to be like an orange guidelines book for recovery. I've tried that, and it just strikes me as it shows how little they understand about the process.
And I was really grateful the other day that someone allowed me to do another presentation on recovery, and allowed me to just rephrase that phrase I actually wrote for you all those years ago, that I just think, you know, commissioning and recovery don't belong together, basically.
It's tricky, isn't it? But it's I think one of the really exciting things about LEROs,
yes,
they hopefully have hubs, central hubs, where under the same building you could have, AA, NA, Al-Anon, Smart Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Women for Sobriety, you know, as well as coaching, five-a-side football, knitting, pathways to college, you know, just that multitude. And where you've got, it's like a hub and spoke model where you effectively think, we do some stuff in here, but only to the extent that we bring outside organisations in that are nothing to do with recovery. We get people out. I mean, I don't know how much you've had to do with Datus in Birmingham. I love the fact that Datus, run by a guy called Jamie Sadler, who I know from when I worked in Birmingham 20 years ago. So the last time I was there, we were actually up with the park rangers at the Lickey Hills Country Park. And now a significant proportion of the upkeep of the Lickey Hills Country Park is done by Datus because there's not enough employed rangers. And they now have bits of contracts for the upkeep of from Birmingham City Council to do that stuff. And I love the fact that that means pathways to volunteering, pathways to employment, outdoor activity, a minibus that gets people from various bits of very post-industrial Birmingham out to an absolutely beautiful place half an hour away.
I like what you were saying earlier, though, about the hub and spoke, because I actually think often as recovery communities, LEROs, this is just a hypothetical number, but you might say that there are 50 to 100 people who know each other, could physically assemble once or twice a year, but actually for the rest of the time, they're all off doing different pockets of stuff in groups of 5 or 10s, you know, and they're not all doing everything all together. It's like they kind of criss and cross and come together. There'll be a Christmas bash, or there'll be a pantomime, or there'll be a recovery walk, or, you know, there'll be. But beyond that, there's all these different.
And I think that is phased as well. I think it's fair to say in the early days of recovery, it's probably useful for some people to have opportunities of spending their time exclusively with other people in recovery. You know, the whole principle of the 90 meetings in 90 days idea. And I'm not saying it's to do with 12-step, but just that idea of stay in your recovery bubble until you're safe enough or ready enough. But then if somebody 3, 4, 5 years down the line still has no networks outside of the recovery world, something has gone badly wrong.